Welcome. We are tasked to construct an interview about the current global issues that may or may not. I am Charmy Ann Gabinete, your host for this time. And let me introduce you to my fellow classmates who will be the participants. Hazel Ann Artieda, Rozl Descartin, Rica Mae Golviogo, Renchie Pepito, Romar Silva, and Prince Guillergan. Together, we represent the second year Pol Sci 2020 to 2021. 5 questions will be asked in the same order that I introduced them. So I hope you guys are ready. Without further ado, let's start with our first question with Hazel. So Hazel, with all the controversies about the COVID-19 vaccines, what is your opinion if the nationally accepted type of COVID-19 turns out fatal? Who is on the hook? And how liable are other countries about it?
So the question of vaccine liability remains theoretical throughout this pandemic. Usually, drug manufacturers are liable for safety of the product. They spend many years developing and testing their drugs to ensure they are safe to use. In most cases, liability would rest with the countries whose regulators issued the emergency authorization, and the countries that accepted this fact early on, notably the United States and the United Kingdom, are the ones that managed to conclude their negotiations with manufacturers, first giving them a head start in vaccinating their population.
Yes, thank you. Those are some wonderful points. How about Ms. Roselle?
Of course, the vaccine is not 100% sure because it was manufactured in a short period of time. If this vaccine will be safe for the future in other persons that possess other sickness, it is also possible that manufacturer are is liable for damages caused by measures to fight COVID-19. But through liability under national law, the state could be liable under international state responsibility. The International Law Commission has adopted a set of rules for responsibility of states to internationally wrongful acts.
Yes, thank you. So the state is determined they're liable. How about Ms. Rika? Can you please share your thoughts?
COVID-19 is the world's major problem nowadays. If the national accepted type of COVID-19 vaccine turns out a lethal, the one who is in hook is or in control is our government. Other countries are also liable because all of us around the world is affected of this pandemic.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for your sightings, Ms. Rika. How about Ms. Renchie? Can you please share your own views?
COVID-19 is one of the major problems in our society, not only here in the Philippines, but also in the entire world. So, who really is on the hook of COVID-19 turns out lethal. So, we know no one's wants to spread this virus. So for me, no one is to blame, only the government, because they accept it with lack of information. So all we need to do is to beware and be aware about vaccination.
Yes, thank you. Mr. Romar, it's your time.
Well, if the national accepted COVID-19 vaccine turns out to be lethal, that can be very dangerous to the people, then the one who is liable to is the government of the state who did not examine carefully the product and the manufacturer that should have an explanation why this vaccine become lethal.
Yes, thank you. So that's a clear point that manufacturers should be responsible for it. And lastly, Mr. Prince.
Before legalizing the vaccine, um, the manufacturers from the nation or the state that came from it, um, I believe has is very careful of it, and there is a lot of scientific examination before it is legalized, and the World Health Organization also checks it and observes it carefully, and as well as if it is accepted here in for example, in the Philippines, it will be checked by the Department of Health and the OST, I guess. As what I can remember, if it turned out to be lethal, I believe that the the one that the agency that is in charge of it in our government will be the one who will to be hooked up for. That's all. Thank you.
Yeah, so thank you for all your answers. Those are quite remarkable. As you remember, it just happened this year in Norway. About 23 people died because of the COVID vaccine. And after the nation has been more cautious of those vaccines. That is just one factor that the Department of Health is in charge of. So the DOH is mandated to be overall technical, and the authority should be on health. So it is their responsibility and also our government. If it's in a globally failed vaccine, then it would be the World Health Organization's responsibility, for my point. So thank you. Moving on to the next question. Should the Philippines be selective to any kind of permitted COVID-19 vaccines that other countries offer to sell or give? Miss Hazel?
So for me, it's a yes, because it is better to be more secured than being excited. And not all citizens of this country are compatible to some vaccines. That's why our government should be more selective to any kind of permitted COVID vaccines offered by the other nations.
Yes, thank you. So we should be cautious. Thank you, Miss Hazel. Miss Rozl Ann Descartin?
Of course. To answer the question, the safety of the people must be the number one priority. The Philippines should be mindful in choosing the vaccine for its people. What is saving money if people are dying? Thank you.
Thank you. I like the first thing that you said. So the priority is the safety of the people. Next one, Miss Rica.
Yes, it's because Philippine government think first the safety of the citizen, our country. Citizen play important role in our country. And always remember, guys, health is wealth.
Wow, so I like your motto. Health is wealth. That's one thing that we would like to put in mind in trying out the COVID vaccines. Miss Renchie, do you have anything to share with us today?
It's a yes, because if it is 100% proven and tested from the other country to prevent spreading viruses, why we should not let it, since vaccine is just a protection, all not a medicine.
Yes, I agree to your point. Mr. Romar Silva.
The Philippine government should be selective when it comes to COVID-19 vaccine for the sake of the Filipino people. We re- as we know, the system of the government here in the Philippines is republic. Well, if the majority of the Filipino citizens do not like the vaccine, then the government should not choose it.
Thank you. So the government must be selective on their part. Mr. Prince Guillergan, it's your time.
So COVID-19 vaccines are the ones that protect people from the coronavirus, and without vaccines, we can be infected. Then there is possibility that we will die. To answer the question, the Philippines should not be choosy in selecting COVID-19 vaccines because, for me, if a vaccine is permitted and safe to be used, our state must acquire it directly wherever it may came from. But the government must ensure that we can afford it, and if we cannot afford it directly, we must be ready to pay for it in order for us to have a good diplomatic relationship with other nations. Therefore, if the vaccines are safe, the the state shall protect and promote the rights to health of the people and instill health consciousness among them as it is written in the Article 2, Section 15 of the 1987 Philippine Constitution. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for citing your answers and those wonderful researches. So I agree in most of you that there is no question about that. We certainly have the right to be selective, but the problem is relying on the law and the law of supply and demand. So typically, the government will have to buy what fits in the budget, and the competition of other countries. So that ends our interrogation about COVID. Now let's focus our attention to the never-ending issue of the West Philippine Sea. So currently, just a few days ago, President Rodrigo Duterte response to this latest provocation has been puzzling display of defeatism, saying that there is nothing we can do. So starting again with Ms. Hazel, with knowledge of international laws and agreements, would it be best for the Philippines to stay silent about the ongoing territorial disputes against China about the Scarborough Shoal?
So as you know, countries such as Philippines and China is arguing about claiming this island. So this is because it is rich in marine ecosystem, gas and oil deposits, and it's an ideal allocation for military strategies. So over time, the Philippines abandoned the back and modified its claim to conform to the 1982 UN Law of the Sea Convention. The Philippines claims sovereignty over the features known as Scarborough Shoal, and the KIG are independent of its archaeologic status. So it is not best for the Philippines to stay silent because the shoal is very clearly ours. And within our exclusive economic zone, it's very clear that in the international laws that Scarborough or the Bajo de Masinloc is part and parcel of the Philippines.
Yes, thank you. So I see your point that Philippines should not be silent about it. Ms. Rozl Ann, can you also state your facts?
Okay, so the Philippines claims to sovereignty over the features known as Scarborough Shoal, and the KIG are independent of its archipelagic status both legally and historically. Because Scarborough Shoal is a feature which exists above high tide, it is capable of sovereign appropriation under international law. So yes, if you have the right, fight. However, there are things to be considered as of the status that we have now. Just like we are weaker state compared to China, and other things should be considered also. So before making a decision, a higher mind or the president should think both consequences of the action. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Rozl Ann. So you told us to weigh first the consequences before starting or before speaking out loud. Ms. Rica Mae Golviogo?
I mean, why we still why will we stay silent if we have the right to fight for it? Yes, stay silent can avoid chaos. However, staying silent means we let China own the Scarborough Show. We have the saying that put up a fight for what you deserve.
Okay, so fight for the right. How about Ms. Renchie Pepito?
Keeping silent is not a good idea, but not keeping silent does not necessarily indicate war. Mobilizing the consensus of ASEAN, a number of whose members are also disputing China's claims in the region. In July 2016, the Arbitral Tribunal in the South China Sea arbitration issued a anonymous award largely favorable to the Philippines. The Philippines has all the rights and jurisdiction of the island.
Okay, so thank you for citing the history of it all and how we won against the battle in the regional tribunal court. How about Mr. Romar Silva?
Well, the Philippines have the rights in the West Philippine Sea, and the country should not be in terms of silence. Well, if we are quiet, then the China will abuse it and stole the resources in the West Philippine Sea without our permission. Thank you.
Yes. So I also understood your point, Mr. Silva, that we have also the right and we should not stay silent about it. And lastly, Mr. Prince Guillergan, we would like to hear your thoughts about it.
Yes, I do agree from what they said that the government must not stay silent or be quiet in terms of territorial disputes with China. And with regards to the people, for me, being silent is something to do if you do not know something about a certain topic, but it is way better to listen to knowledgeable people and to research and study in order to become learned. And if you already are knowledgeable about the topic, maybe that is the time to speak about territorial disputes. Hence, to practice our sovereignty and protect our territory is not only about being vocal, because we have freedom of speech, but it also requires wisdom and facts in order for you not to lose in a territorial dispute or in other disputes. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Prince. Though we have different arguments on this subject, I appreciate all your researches and your ideas. On my side, I do not see the point of not fighting for it. In line with Mr. Prince's saying, it says, "Iuris ignorantia est cum, eos nostrum ignoramus," which means it is ignorance of the law that we do not know our own rights. Our next question, this goes to us as being education or taking college. So, as an Asian student, what will you do to dismantle discrimination of Asians working and living in other non-Asian nations? Miss Hazel, can you please have the platform?
Over the past few years, there has been a sharp escalation in hate speech, hate crimes, and other forms of harassment against members of Asian American, and Pacific Islander community in the United States. So as a student, I will make a campaign to our president so he can be able to talk and form an agreement with the president of the US in making society a more just and equitable place, free from fear and prejudice.
Okay, so we will be looking forward for what you will write, and we will sign. We will surely sign on that contract. Ms. Rozl is currently having some technical difficulties, so we'll skip a little bit and go to Ms. Rica.
So, for me, as an Asian student, what I can do, or maybe what I can do, is to start advocacy and no to Asian discrimination. And I will ask the help of my fellow students or my fellow Asian to promote this advocacy. That's all.
Okay, so I like your idea, Ms. Golviogo. We'll totally support you on that. So Ms. Descartin is back with us. So it would be her time. Ms. Rozl, same question goes to you.
What is the question, guys?
Uh, Same question goes to you. As an Asian student, what will you do to dismantle the discrimination of Asians working and living with non-Asian nations?
Uh, Honestly, as a student, I have a lesser voice to speak about this Asian discrimination. However, to my knowledge, there are already a lot of anti-discrimination laws that are implemented in each country. And that will be the most powerful way of preventing and lessening the number of the issue.
Yes, thank you. So you're saying that it's all in the hands of the government and we have laws for them. Next one, Miss Renchie, Pepito, are you ready?
Social media is a big help by giving social awareness to young people such as me. I am already making my part supporting anti-racial program.
Okay, so thank you. We are happy that you are already making your steps through it. Mr. Romar Silva.
Well, as an Asian student, the only I can do is to write articles about discrimination and how bad it is to the lives of the Asian people to the other nations. Well, I well the on- well I can post it in the internet or share it to the international organizations that has the that has the goal to fight discrimination.
Yes, I like your idea to keep the fight silent by writing online and using social media. Okay, so let's ask writer himself, Mr. Prince Guillergan. Okay, Mr. Gilligan, can you please unmute your mic?
Wherever the continent we are from, we should be proud of our own ways. We should continue the goodness in our own ways because life is a gift or a grace. As an Asian student, the best way that I can do to dismantle the discrimination of Asians from other non-Asian nations is to promote respect and cultural and racial differences. How will I do that? First, respect must begin with myself. Second, if it already began from myself, I should make suitable solutions such as spreading promotions of respect of cultural and racial differences through the internet because as a student, I think this is the easiest way that I can do. Third is to become a reflection to others. I should not only do that on the internet, but I should also do that in the real world scenario. Therefore, the solution to equality will only occur if we treat each other equally, whatever our social status, age, gender, race, culture, or nationality, and respect always comes from ourselves. Thank you. Um, that's all.
Yes, thank you. I like your point that we start within ourselves first. So, under international relations, a state is responsible for direct violations of another state to their individual. So they set forth rights such as rights to live, equality to work, equality to work, social security, and education. So we can all say that Miss Roselle is right that we have those rights that the government is always securing our citizens abroad. So we'll move on to our last question. It goes, does loaning budget from the World Bank, IMF, or International Monetary Fund, or from high-income countries worth its benefits when weighing the credit liabilities concerning the country's economy? Again, we would like to start with Miss Hazel Ann.
So as we know, bank considers itself a unique financial institution that sets up partnerships that reduce poverty and support economic development. But in my opinion, loaning budgets from World Bank, IMF, or from a high-income countries does not worth its benefits because it would be worse to the relation with other nations, especially if our country could not pay their debt. Citizens of this country will be able to pay the working in the loaned country like a slave because for them we owe debt. That's all.
Yes, thank you. I like your reasons why it is not necessary or why it's not worth it. Next one, Miss Rosal Ann.
Okay, so organizations such as IMF and World Bank have their own objectives. Just like in my idea of World Bank, it is an international organization, development organization owned by 187 countries. Its role is to reduce poverty by lending money to the government of its poorer members to improve their economies and to improve the standard of living of their people. So yes, it is a great benefit and favor to a state to borrow if it is suffering with its economy. But as I have said, always think of the customer.
Yes, thank you. So she is saying that for the success of the country and for the welfare of the country, it is necessary to have loans in the World Bank. Ms. Rica Mae Golviogo?
For me, no, because it will affect the nation's image. May we will be more discriminated if we work abroad because we show no economy stability. Abuse of power may happen because we are in debt to them.
Yes. Loaning or borrowing money can affect our personal or the country's reputation. And that is true in some cases where other countries may rely on the economic stability when handling the affairs of the country. So the next one, Ms. Renchie Pepito, can you also give us a little bit of your enlightenment?
So for me, if it is beneficiary and needed in our country, why not? Because the organization IMF is the organization IMF concern is to continue to support countries on the path to recovery by providing policy advice, financial support, capacity development, and debt relief for the poorest. But if it is harmful and can affect the image of our country, no, thank you. That's all.
Okay, so it kind of depends on a lot of things for Ms. Renchie Pepito. Mr. Romar Silva, can you also cite?
When it comes to times of emergency or the economy is going to the bottom, then it is necessary to owe money to IMF, World Bank, or other developed states, as long as they do not abuse the agreements, and we will have a good relationship to them. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. It does affect our relationship with the countries when we borrow money for them or when we loan. So it's good to bear in mind that while we have or we owe something to them, it's good that our relationship will also not be put in jeopardy. Okay, lastly, Mr. Prince Guillergan, it's your time. Mr. Guillergan, can you please unmute your mic too?
Sorry, so I was saying, why do we loan is the first thing that we should know first. Is it necessary or not? Loaning of money from the World Bank, IMF, or high-income countries must have a reasonable reason, which is for the greatest good of the greatest number of people. Is it beneficial? Yes, it is beneficial if the government will use it properly without engaging themselves to graft and corruption. And when it comes to the concern of debts and as a problem of our economy, we should always remember that we should not always rely on international organizations and the helpful neighboring countries. We should find solutions that can help us solve our problems economically. And for the trillions of pesos that we have loaned, we should make solutions such as improving our GOCC, or the government-owned and controlled corporations, which is the other source of our national budget besides the taxes that came from the people. To sum up everything, it is okay to loan if it is really necessary, but we should have solutions to pay it. That's my answer. Thank you very much for that question.
We have reached the conclusion of our interview. I highly appreciate all those researched comments and your time today. It's been a pleasure having this interview with you. Again, thank you, Ms. Hazel Ann Artieda, Rozl Ann Descartin, Rica Mae Golviogo, Renchie Marie Pepito, Christian Romar Silva, and Prince Leowell Guillergan. Together, we represent the second year Pulsai 2020 to 2021.